Hello everybody, Z3KO Trinity here. Grab yourself a nice cold tea and have yourself a drink. This ain't about tea. This is about Stephen King. The man, the myth, the legend. And I look more whiter today than I ever have. Yeah, speaking of Stephen King, I have old Pennywise the Clown here. That's right, it's one of my favorite shirts. Aren't you gonna say hello? But it's snowing outside where I live, and it is cold as balls where I live, so. But anyway, let's get into this, shall we? We got here Stephen King's Eye of the Tiger. Now, if you don't know who Mr. Stephen King is, let's pretend that we live in a world where we did not know who Stephen King is. And you walked into that bookstore and you happen to see this sitting on the shelf like that. First of all, the art would immediately draw me in, because I would think that that's like the coolest looking book ever. Just a dragon with a nice green. If I put it on my wall, it kind of disappears. That's kind of funny. But yeah, it's my favorite green. You know, the red pops out at you in this nice badass drawing of a dragon. The back of the box is just simply a castle and like a little peek hole. It's like a dimension diamond opened up, and it's a nice snowy castle. And you see this and you're like, huh. So I will give points right off the bat for presentation of the artwork. Definitely is an eye candy, I believe but the correct term would be. Like myself. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I will give it credit for that. But will it oh, check that out. Oh, that's right. I totally forgot about this. But check this out. This is crazy. When I first ordered the book and got it online, I love getting like used books from people because sometimes you find the weirdest things in them. And it kind of, to me, it kind of gives the book history. Well, this one has some kind of like, I don't even know what you would call it. On the back is like a Pepsi kind of thing. Front looks like some kind of like ticket. But I don't know. But the coolest thing is, it has my name right there. Jacob. Ain't that the coolest thing ever? When I first found that in the books, it was like in a random page. I didn't even realize that said Jacob, honestly. But that's the coolest thing ever. But let's see. It says on the cover sleeve, it says, a tale of archetypal heroes? Archetypal? I don't know. Fuck it. A tale of heroes and sweeping adventures of dragons and princes and evil wizards, as only Stephen King can tell it. The passage through the castle is dim, sensed by few and walked by only one. Flag knows the way well. So if you know The Stand, you know who Flag is. In 400 years, he has walked it many times, in many guises, but now the passage serves its true purpose, through the spy hole it conceals. The court magician observes King Roland, aka from the Dark Tower, old, weak, yet still a king. Roland's time is nearly over, though, and young Prince Peter, tall and handsome, himself, the measure of a king in all ways, stands to inherit the realm. Yet a tiny mouse is enough to bring him down, a mouse that changes upon a grain of dragon sand behind Peter's shelves and dies crying tears of fire and belching gray smoke. A mouse that dies as King Roland does. Flag saw it all and smiled, for now Prince Thomas, a young boy, a young whippersnapper, easily swayed to Flag's own purposes, would rule the kingdom. But Thomas has a secret that has turned his days into nightmares and his nights into prayed for oblivion. The last bastion of hope lies at the top of the Needle, the royal prison where Peter plans a daring escape. Now, With that said, that was like the whole front passage there. With that said, was that enough to really drag us in? No. At least it didn't me. It kind of lost me right then and there. And we already know that the mouse dies, so, you know, what are we setting ourselves up for? That's like J.K. Rowling's book. You read the subplot. Oh, Dobby's gonna die sacrificing himself for Harry Potter. Oh, excuse me. Just, I don't know. It was kind of all over the place for me. So it kind of lost me. But I do love the illustration in the book. I think that's really nice. I think they should do illustrations in all books. That's kind of cool. But, yeah, if that wasn't enough to grab you by the balls, let's see. Ooh, look at that fancy first page there. Once in a kingdom called Delane, there was a king with 2 sons. Delane was a very old kingdom, and it had hundreds of kings, perhaps even thousands. When time goes on long enough, not even historians can remember everything. Roland the Good was neither the best nor the worst king ever to rule the land. He tried very hard not to do anyone great evil, and mostly succeeded. He also tried very hard to do great works, but unfortunately he didn't succeed so well at that. Now, with that little said, was that enough to really drag you guys into the story? As for me, it did kind of have that sort of, like, oh, kind of feel to it. I don't know, it's so hard to explain it. But as you're reading it, it felt to me like I should be reading it like this. Once in a kingdom called Delane, there was a king with 2 sons. Delane was a very old kingdom, and it had hundreds of kings. Perhaps thousands. Like, it felt intense. Like, just reading it kind of, the way it was worded kind of was, like, intense. But I don't think it was really enough to kind of hit me right off the bat. Now, normally, whenever I do these, I tell you guys, hey, it turns out this book is actually excellent. You guys need to read this one. But I have not read this book. And I had mixed feelings about even reading this book. So please, in the comment section below, tell me, is this book worth reading? Let me know your thoughts. Was it enough to catch you? The art did for me. The side story kind of lost me. And that intro kind of pulled me in a little. So I would give it a half out of, you know, the halfway mark of that. Put my little... Next up, we got a real book. Know what I mean? Misery, the story of my life. This is one of Stephen King's masterpieces. But, you know, the drill. If I didn't know who he was, saw this on the shelf at a bookstore, would it immediately draw me in? Yes! Have you seen the art of this book? The art has big bloodshot misery written across, and the picture is of a depressed looking man in a wheelchair, and outside is this beautiful, like, sunlit barn with snow on the ground, snow on the barn. And his room is all empty and shit. There's just a bed here, a rug there, nothing else. And then you have this woman-like Godzilla creature standing over him with what appears to be an axe. Now, how does that not draw you in? It's about as appealing as Stephen King's mustache. His unibrow as well. But if that wasn't enough to grab your guys' attention, let's just turn the page and see what it says. Misery. Stephen King is arguably, we don't know anything about Stephen King, so we're going to skip that. Paul Sheldon author of a best-selling series of historical romances, wakes up one winter day in a strange place, a secluded farmhouse in Colorado. He wakes up to unspeakable pain, a dislocated pelvis, a crushed knee, 2 shattered legs, and to a bizarre greeting from a woman who saved his life. I am your #1 fan. Annie Wilkes is a huge ex-nurse, handy with controlled substances and other instruments of abuse, including an axe and a blowtorch. A dangerous psychotic with a romper room sense of good and bad, fair and unfair, Annie Wilkes may be Stephen King's most terrifying creation. It's not fair, for example, that her favorite character in the world, Misery Chastain, has been killed by her creator, as Annie discovers when Paul's latest novel comes out in paperback, and it's not good that her favorite writer has been a don't be and written a different kind of novel, a nasty novel. The dirty little nasty novel. The novel he has always wanted to write. The only copy of which now lies in Annie's angry hands. My God, was that not thrilling? I feel like going outside and putting car batteries on my nipples and giving me a charge. How excited I am. Was that enough to pull you guys in? If it didn't, you're dumb and retarded. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm not just saying that. I'm just saying that was good writing. Like, if I turned the page and I'm like, oh, I wonder what this is about, and read that little that I just read, oh, I'd be all aboard this. I'll be like Popeye, all aboard on this motherfucker. But if that wasn't enough, and you wanted to see what the first page said, Chapter 1, Annie. Literally the first thing it says is these sounds even in a haze. But sometimes then Chapter 2. But sometimes the sounds, like the pain, faded, and then there was only the haze. He remembered darkness. Solid darkness had come before the haze. Did that mean he was making progress? Let there be light, even in the hazy variety, and the light was good, and so on and so on. Had those sounds existed in the darkness? He didn't know the answers to any of these questions. Did it make sense to ask them? He didn't know the answer to that one either. The pain was somewhere below the sounds. The pain was east of the sun and south of his ears. That was all he did know. For some length of time that seemed very long, and so was since the pain and the stormy haze were the only two things which existed. Those sounds were the only outer reality. He had no idea who he was or where he was, and cared to know neither. He wished he was dead, but through a pain-soaked haze that filled his mind like a summer storm cloud, he did not know he wished it. So, the first paragraph talks about his broken legs and how agonizing and miserable it is. Now, poetically, yes, that was very good. It matched the whole, with it explaining what happened to his legs in the page turner. I do believe that would draw my attention. If not, I would read the end, but the ending would spoil some stuff. And Stephen King did an excellent job with this book. Me as a horror writer, I'm looking for that perfect story myself. And this, I believe, is one of Stephen King's absolute best works. Period. Have not read this? Please, stop the video, go to your nearest bookstore, go to your nearest page on your phone or whatever, read this book. Excellent. Excellent. I finished the book in 2 days. That's how much I loved it. I just non-stop couldn't put it down. And finally, we come upon the Tommyknockers, the Tommy Knick-Knack Paddywhacks. with Stephen King looking like Cheech Chong Bundy over here. Stephen King goes through a big phase with hair, doesn't he? Like, okay, yeah, whatevs. But yeah, the Tommyknockers, a lot of people really don't like the Tommyknockers, but I personally thought it was a really good story. Top 10, maybe not, but it was a pretty good story. Let's see, the artwork. Really, there is no artwork, it's just a glowing green light, and it just says, the Tommyknockers. And of course the back is Stephen King laying there like, paint me as one of your French girls. So let's see what it says. Turn the page. Late last night and the night before, Tommyknockers knocking at the door. I want to go out, don't know if I can, 'cause I'm so afraid of the Tommyknocker man. It begins with nothing more frightening than a nursery rhyme. Yet in Stephen King's hands, it becomes an unforgettable parable of dread, a threat from an unimaginable darkness that drags the practical inhabitants of a New England village into a hell worse than their own horrible nightmares and yours. It begins with a writer named Roberta Anderson. Looking for firewood in the forest that stretches behind her house, Bobby stumbles over 3 inches of metal, which unusually heavy spring runoff has left sticking out of the soil. A Lager's beer can, she thinks at first, but the metal was as solid as a mother rock. It begins with Bobby's discovery of the ship in the earth, a ship buried for millions of years, but still vibrating faintly, still humming with some sort of life. Faint, weak, but still better left alone. Bobby then begins to dig tentatively at first, then compulsively, and is joined by her old friend and one-time lover, Jim Gardner. Aided by a weirdly advanced technology, their excavation proceeds apace. Now, with that being said, was that enough to really drag you guys into the story? Like, if you picked up the book and you're like, and you read that little tidbit, would that be enough to be like, okay, I think I'll buy this book and read it? It does give you that sense of wonder. Like, when it talks about a ship, you immediately know aliens. And, it kind of gives it that mysterious kind of feel. Like, this little tidbit literally is the beginning of the book, and it really doesn't give away hardly anything to the story, which I like a lot. Misery, however, when you read the tidbit, it did give away like a big chunk of the book, but this actually just gives away how it begins. And it still leaves you with that sense of, ooh, I wonder what's going to happen now. But if that wasn't enough to tickle your fancy, let's see what the first thing says. Anderson stumbles. For want of a nail, the kingdom was lost. That's how the catechism goes when you boil it down. In the end, you can boil everything down to something similar, or so Roberta Anderson thought much later on. It's either all an accident or all fate. Anderson literally stumbled over her destiny in the small town of Haven, Maine on June 21st, 1988. That stumble was the root of the matter. All the rest was nothing but history. Now, I like stories that begin like that. It's so poetic, and I think that kind of draws me into a story. Like, when I first read the first few sentences, I want it to be so poetic. I don't want it to be like, Mom and Pa went down to the road and they saw some shit. I want it to be like, Ma and Pa stumbled upon the road and seen what would never be seen again. Or something like that, you know. Just add some kind of poetic stuff to it. But was that enough to really drag me into the story? It's not really, but I'm glad that I did actually pick it up and read it. See, if I wouldn't have known who Stephen King was, I probably would have passed on this. Like, if I picked it up and read that tidbit, honestly, I probably been like, nah, and kept looking until I found Misery. But it's a good book. I would recommend you guys to read it. Like, it's not really that big of a book, and I just thought that the story was kind of cool. It was really interesting. It was very boring, though. I mean, it was hard for me to read and get through it all, but ultimately, it was a good story. And the ending was kind of, like, you know, I didn't really see the ending coming, but... Oh, it was good. It was good, okay. But thank you guys so much. You want to have me another sip of tea. And, thank you for joining me on my Stephen King previews. I forgot to say what the video was at the beginning, but if you haven't guessed by the thing up top, you know, whatevs, that's on you. But, yeah, thank you for joining me. What did you think? Did you think that this was more interesting? Did you think Misery was more interesting? Did you think the Tommyknockers was more interesting? Did you think me doing this is more interesting? Let me know in the comment section below. Until next time, I guess. Spare fingers. See you on the next video.